So the flight was super long, and I remember I was so tired from traveling that I was just like, yeah, I could not keep my eyes open the entire time we were like in the van to go to the mission home, because the mission home was about 3 or 4 hours away from the airport in Manila. And I remember just like getting there and just feeling like overwhelmed with heat. It was just so hot, but at the same time, like, it was totally fine. I just was so exhausted that the heat made it worse. You're just like, oh, I just want to go to sleep, but then you don't really have time for that because they just kind of put you in the mission home and like start your training, and the next day you're in the field. So it was just a whole blur of events and emotions. The Olongapo Mission is on the left side of the main island of Luzon up in the north. So if you're like looking at a map, and this Philippines is surrounded by those like 4 bodies of water. So the right side is the Pacific Ocean, whereas the left side is the South China Sea. So we were literally along the coast of the South China Sea, which was kind of cool because one of my areas was like in the beach, like it just like was. And so that was the very northern part of the mission, was like that very tip top kind of on the beach. It was called Infanta, and then you just kind of go down the coast a little ways all the way until Mariveles, which is the southern tip of that part of the mission and of Luzon. And I thought it was really cool because the Olongapo Mission has like so much history, as far as having like World War II happened in that part of the Philippines, and there's like these markers like all the way down like the bottom half of our mission, just marking the death march that happened for like the Filipino and American soldiers that were trying to get away from the Japanese, which I thought was crazy. Like that, you know, I didn't even know that had happened in the Philippines, but after having like read more about it and like being there and seeing all these like memorials to them, it was pretty cool. Like, I mean, it was just cool that like there was actually like American history in the Philippines, which I thought was awesome. So there's only one stake in the Olongapo Mission. It's the Balanga stake, and I served in 2 of the wards in the Balanga stake. The rest of the areas were all branches and districts. So it was interesting. They were trying to create a new stake up in the northern part of the mission. So I'm not sure what's happened since I've left, but I really hope that one day that it becomes a stake, because they're really strong. So Manila is about 3 to 4 hours of a bus ride to get to like the Quezon, because it's in Quezon City. And the Ardhaneta Temple, I feel like it will be closer to at least the top half of the mission, so they would like be able to go more frequently, I would guess. I mean, you're still gonna have to pay bus fare either way, but I feel like it might be a little bit closer. So I definitely want to go back, like, to see it once it's done. My 5th area was a Polo, which is a city. So I hadn't been in a city yet, and that was also in Bataan. That was part of the stake that I was talking about. So they were a very big ward. They actually had, in that same building, they had 2 wards that met there, which was like huge, because in my other areas it was just branches and it was very small and just one branch met in this small building. But this one was like the stake center, or no, yeah, this was the stake center, and it was, so there was 2 wards there, and Apollo was one of them. And so our area was a little bit smaller. It kind of divided by the side of the road. So the left side of the road was the Arani ward, and the right side of the road was the Apollo ward, and then you just kind of split off going that way. So that was just basically like more city, like bigger houses were built there, and there were still some smaller houses, but mostly like more the like wealthier people lived there, which was interesting because I'd never really interacted with them before. And the work was really, I was only there for 6 weeks and then I went home, but I really liked it there. It was also, I mean, I loved all of my areas, but Apollo like will always hold a special place in my heart, just because the people there were so loving to me. Even though I was like going home in 6 weeks, they knew that I was going home. It was my last transfer, but they just took me in and took me in as if I was going to be there forever. So I really appreciate them and love that ward to death. So my first area was called Mandama, which was a break off of Hermosa. So the main city was Hermosa, but then Mandama was like just like a like a part of the city, because we had other missionaries in like actual Hermosa. And that was in Bataan, which is the very bottom half of the mission. And they speak mainly Tagalog there. There were some people that spoke some different dialects, but at that point in my mission, I didn't really know what was different and what wasn't, because it all sounded gibberish to me. Mandama was definitely more of a, what's the word? Provincial. Yeah, it was a provincial area, so it was a lot of farming, and that one wasn't near the water, so there wasn't really any fishermen, but they were mostly like people that worked in the rice fields. And like there was a couple of elementary schools, maybe, like I don't really know. It was a pretty small area for my first area. We were able to walk the whole thing, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, it was basically only dirt roads only. There was one street that ran through the entire town, and then just like break-offs of dirt roads. And I remember in my first area, I was asked to lead my area after 7 days, which basically means that I was the only missionary in that area that knew anything about the area. So like the person that came in to train me after my trainer had to leave was very terrified, because she didn't know the area and I was brand new to this the Philippines. And I'm just like, okay, well, there's no address, so I think it's like right on the dirt road, then you go left up like by the cows, and then right that way, like they live over there somewhere, you know. And so it was like super hard to learn the road system, just because it like wasn't really numbered, and there was just nothing. You just had to kind of go off of memory and like people. So like, okay, I know that member family lives in that house, so a couple houses down is where this investigator is. And that's kind of like how we had to do everything in that area specifically. So my second area was Pilar. That was also in Bataan, so it's a bit more south than my first area. And that was actually a really cool area. We had to cross a river several times a week to go visit like some of the like less active members that lived up in this little hill, which was kind of weird, because like at first I was like, wow, we have to cross a river? Like that's so intimidating. But it was, I don't know, it was very interesting that like there were so many different types of places in the Philippines. Like the first area was very farmland. Second area, like there was a lot of rice fields as well, because I mean that's what you're gonna find up there. But there's also a lot more like running water as in like lakes and rivers and things like that. And that's also where the Mount Summit is. It's like a famous place in the Philippines. It's a tourist spot. So like you go up this mountain several miles into the mountain, and there's like a huge cross. So you can see that from any part of that area. And it's really cool. Like the cross is where it's like the very end of the start of the Bataan Death March, I think. Or it's just they have like some memorials from World War II there, which was really cool. We got to go one time. So my third area was San Augustine, which was a break-off of Iba, which is in Zambales. So that in the mission, there's Bataan, Zambales, and then there's a little bit of Pampanga and a little bit of Pangasinan in the mission. And those are just 4 different regions. I guess you could say states. I don't really know what it would be like equivalent to here. But so I was in Bataan for my first 2 areas, and then Zambales for my third area, and that was my favorite, like one of my favorite areas by far. I was only there for 10 weeks because we had like a regular transfer and then like a little short transfer because of like some things happening in the mission. But I feel like I had the most success in that area because I was only there for so short a time, but like I just got down to it and I got to know the people. And just the members were incredible up there, and they just were so good at fellowshipping. And but the only difference between that area and the last 2 was because it was in the north. The people spoke a little bit more of a different dialect. Like they spoke more Zambal, which is like Zambal. It's like a dialect just in Zambales. I don't know. I didn't really understand that, but they could all speak Tagalog as well, so that was good. But sometimes they would break off into Zambal, and I was like, just gonna sit here and pretend like I understand. yeah, so that the culture there was basically the same, rice fields. A lot of people lived in the mountains at that point. My fourth area was my longest area. I was there in Infanta for 7.5 months. And that was the area on the beach. So like there was a lot of appointments where we just like get to take off our shoes and like walk along the beach to like the houses that were on there. And that was like, I thought that was pretty cool because I was like, wow, like I get to walk like on in the South China Sea. Like that's like not a lot of people can say that. So it was like really cool. But the thing was, is because it was on the beach, almost all of the men were fishermen. So it was really hard to like get them to commit to come to church because they have to fish every day. And Sunday was one of their best days in order to like provide for their family. So that was always like really difficult. But once we were able to get them to church, they were able to like see those blessings, which I thought was really interesting about those people. Filipino people are like the kindest people you'll ever meet. They have like basically nothing, but they're willing to give you everything. And that was something that I just really loved about them. Just every time we'd go over to anyone's house, like maybe we were contacting them on the street and they invited us in, like they would like get you a soda or, you know, give you whatever snack food that they had because they just like wanted to make you feel welcome at their home. And I just thought that was really interesting because I feel like as an American, like we don't really do that. Like if someone like came to your door unannounced, like you wouldn't really like invite them in and be like, oh, like have some food, especially if you don't know them, you know. But they're just very open and they're very willing to like invite you to be part of their life, which I thought was really fun and just really interesting. Before I went to my mission, I was really excited because I'd heard that they were like a rice-based mission, and I love rice. And so it was great because they eat it 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, night, with just like a little bit of meal and then like this much rice. So it was great because it like filled you up quicker, I felt like, but it was also cheap. So I tried balut. So that was pretty cool. I only had it once. We'll never do it again. It was disgusting. So if anyone watching this ever gets tempted to eat balut on your mission, just do it to say that you did it because it's a pretty gross thing. But I really liked all of the like chicken dishes, like chicken adobo and chicken tinola. Everything is cooked in garlic and onion, so don't expect anything like without it. But I really liked the food there, and I was really lucky to have people that wanted to feed us a lot of the time. There were a couple of areas where maybe we didn't get fed as often, but once you got to know the ward members pretty well, then they would start like inviting you to come, or you could just share a message and then they'd give you food anyway. So it was great. Well, I don't mean to scare anyone, but I had, in my 4th area, I was asleep one night and I felt something in my ear and I was just like freaking out because I was like, I can't hear anything. And so I could wake up my companion. It was like the only time I'd ever had an American companion. So we both were like, what the heck are we gonna do? Like, what is happening? So like we like knock on our neighbor's door who was a member, and they were like, oh, like let us call you a tricycle. Let's get you taken to the hospital. Like we think there's some type of bug in there, but we didn't know what it was. We get to the hospital and these people don't know what they're doing. It's like the night shift crew at the hospital. And let me just tell you, the hospital is like not a hospital, at least by American standards. It's very much like a room, like the emergency room was a literal room that like you go into for emergencies. Like it was just this room with a table and you're just like, well, I hope they can help me out. So they just like stick this like instrument in my ear and like find out later it's this cockroach that has wedged itself in my ear. But luckily, like I'd been there long enough in the Philippines that it like wasn't like, I'm not saying it wasn't weird because it was definitely weird, but I was kind of okay with the, like I didn't cry about it. Like it was just kind of like, all right, whatever, like let's get this thing out, let's go get our baptism done, you know. Like it was funny because we get the cockroach out, like they ended up sending me home after taking half of it out because they couldn't get the rest. They're like, we might have to get it surgically removed. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I get there the next morning because they tell me just to come back once it's like, you know, later in the day when the doctor's actually there. The doctor, it's so funny. I just have to say this description of him. I walk in, I'm like, who's the doctor? And it's this guy in jeans and a wolf t-shirt. And I'm just like, he doesn't even have a lab coat on. Like, how do I trust this man? But he goes in and he like just plucks out the rest of it in one foul swoop. There's the head, the cockroach is gone. He gives me some medicine for my ear, and then we just leave. And we go and we'd have our baptism, and like nobody knew about it. It was fine until some people did start knowing about it because our neighbor told everyone. And so you can just imagine, like, word spread through my entire ward or branch at that point, and they're just like, oh my gosh, like, Lord, Sister Garrett had a cockroach in her ear, you know. And then the mission president finds out about it because we have to like report like that we went to the hospital, and he tells everyone. Like, he uses it as a story in every single like district conference. So he like goes and speaks at like state conferences and district conferences, and he used it in absolutely every district and stake in the mission. So all of my former converts, all of the members from all the wards I'd served in knew that Sister Garrett got a cockroach in her ear at the very end of her mission. So that was like the craziest thing that ever happened to me. In my first area, we found a less active member. Is this lady in the ward who was from like one of the poorest areas I'd ever seen. She had, how many kids did she have? I think it was maybe 7 or 8 kids, and they all lived in this one-room house. And I remember finding her on the records, and like we'd been teaching her for a while, trying to get her back to church, but her family wasn't really like listening to the message. It was more like we were just trying to reactivate her and her daughter that had been baptized. But then her oldest son started listening to us. His name was Joseph, and we ended up being able to teach him and watch him be baptized, which was great. And he is still strong in the church till this day. Like, he's awesome. So he was my first baptism that I'd ever like been a part of. And his brother was also baptized on the same day. He was only like 11, I think, at the time. But then eventually we taught his whole family, like, the dad would sit in and listen, and he like could raise his hand and he knew all the answers to the questions. There was the 15-year-old boy could like quote the entire Joseph Smith story. He'd heard it so many times being taught to his other siblings. So he finally decides to get baptized as well, and like we ended up, all of their kids got baptized except for the youngest 2 who weren't 8 yet. But the dad like would not budge. He was just like, I believe everything. I know it's all true. I just don't want to go to church, and I don't want to stop smoking. And so we were just like, oh, like, how are we going to help him? Well, then I ended up getting transferred, and I was in contact with Joseph and his mom a little bit still while I was on my mission. Like, I would get letters from them saying like, hey, we're still active, but like all of my siblings are starting to not go because like there's just too many of them to like keep in tow while trying to walk, you know, to church. But then like this miracle happened, and in my last, I was in Infanta, so that was my 4th area, the one in the very north of the mission, and then my first area was the one more towards the south of the mission. And I remember getting an email from a sister serving in that ward in my first area, Mandama, and she said, hey, like, I heard that you were the ones that baptized the Salvador family. I just wanted to let you know that Tatay Salvador, which means like the father, has been coming to church. And I said, no way. She's like, yeah, and he hasn't smoked in a week. And I was like, what? Like, are you serious? I was like, no, give me more details. She's like, we've set a baptismal date for him. We're having faith. We just wanted to let you know, maybe start praying for him again. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like, this is so exciting. But like, I was like sad at the same time, because I was like, man, I really wish I could be there. Because at that point, like, we weren't allowed to travel back and forth to other areas that we'd previously been in, or just like to see a baptism or anything. So the week before Tatay Salvador's baptism was scheduled was transfer day, and I thought for sure, I had 6 weeks left of my mission, I was not going to go anywhere, I was just going to stay up in Infanta. Then I get called to go to Polo, which is the area right next to Mandama. So I was just like, okay, if I'm going to be in Polo, like, I'm going to be in the same district as the sisters in Mandama. There's some way that I'm going to be able to get to this baptism. But like, I knew that it was like a big stretch, because we normally weren't allowed to like go to other areas. And so I remember calling my mission president. I said, President, like, I just need to tell you about this family, and like this man is getting baptized, and I haven't seen them since my first area. It's been almost like it's been about a year since I've seen them, and I just really would like to see them before I go home and go to this baptism. So he approved it. He said, you know what? I think that you need to be there. I think you need to go to this baptism. This is your baptism. And I was like, sweet. So me and my companion from a Polo, we just hopped on a little Jeep, went, maybe 20 minutes over to Mandama, and showed up at this baptism unannounced. We didn't tell anyone we were coming. And the entire ward was freaking out because I was there, and it was just I have never felt so much joy in my life than that day. Getting to be reunited with this family that I had met and baptized most of them at the very beginning of my mission. And then for them to also see that I could speak their language. Before I couldn't. I was struggling the whole time trying to teach them. But then a year later, I was maybe 4 weeks away from going home, and I was fluently speaking to them about life and just how they'd been. And the dad, Tatay Salvador, gets up to bear his testimony after his baptism, and he thanks the sisters that taught him, and then he thanks me for having influenced him so long ago. And he said basically I planted this seed in him that he he couldn't get it out of his head. And he'd written me a couple of letters as well saying I'm never going to get baptized, but thanks for the letter, you're pretty cool, I'm glad we're friends type stuff. And so it was just interesting that he had, I don't know, kind of softened his heart by that point, right before I was going to go home, because I felt it was God's gift to me almost, just showing me hey, you did a really good job, you did change people, and you really helped bring the church into their lives. And it was just cool to see that. It was the happiest day of my life for sure. There was one family that we found in my third area of San Augustine, and they lived pretty far up into the mountains. And I think what had happened was right before I got there, the parents of this family had gotten baptized. So all of their kids were grown though. So I don't want to make it seem it was this cute little family. It was this older couple. They were maybe in their 60s, and then they had kids that were 30, 20 something, and then their youngest was about 21 or 22. And some of them still kind of lived together down at the base of the mountain. And so we ran into them tracting, which was actually really interesting, and found out that their parents were the ones that had just gotten baptized the week before. We're oh, your parents are actually a member of our church now. They're really? That's so weird, And so we started teaching them, and ended up that this lady, she got baptized, and then her brother got baptized too as a 21-year-old. And I guess it's not a super cool wow, something amazing happened. But what was amazing to me was that this 21-year-old male, Sammy is his name, got baptized, and then was called as the young men's president of the ward. So he had this calling, which I thought was really interesting. So if you go to the mission, encourage the bishop to give callings to your new converts, because that really will help them. And then now he's on mission, which I thought was way cool. Wow, I baptized someone that's going to go baptize other people. That's just that rippling effect. So that's really cool. He is actually in I can't remember what mission it is. It's one of the central missions, I think, of the Philippines. But anyways, it doesn't really matter where. It's just really cool that he was so willing to go on a mission right from when he got baptized. We taught him about missionary work maybe right after he'd been baptized, and he's oh, I want to be just like you sisters. I want to do that. And so throughout the rest of my mission, I think I had maybe 8 months left after he got baptized. I would just send him encouraging letters and pictures from my mission, and I sent him a tie at the very end of my mission because I just thought it would be really fun. And now he has it on his mission, and he's just guys, my sister gave this to me, And so it's really cool just to see the effects that you can have on people, and how not only is it definitely wasn't me that did that. It was Heavenly Father telling him hey, you're going to be a good missionary. So Heavenly Father was the one that motivated him to go, because I don't think he would have done it had it not been for the Spirit that was so rich in his life at that point. So that was really cool. A lot of the time I feel some missionaries go in thinking that this is just going to be a vacation to a really cool spot, but really a mission is way more difficult than anyone would really know unless they've done it, you know? And I feel like, at least for me, I did hit a point at maybe the first like 3 months of my mission where I struggled in finding my purpose. And I thought that, you know, I mentioned earlier how I had to leave my area after 7 days, and like my companion didn't know the area. So that was like super stressful for me. Not only that, but like my companion didn't necessarily get along with me very well because she was a native Filipino. She didn't really speak English to me ever. And so I just felt like there was a very big disconnect. And I learned that missions are hard, and like trying to go home is not the answer. I did end up calling my mission president like maybe a couple months in, just saying I can't do this anymore. I really just don't think this is for me. Like, I can't do this. My companion hates me. I have awful language skills and I don't know the area. It's too hot. Like, I had gotten sick the first like month of being there. But then he said, Sister Garrett, suck it up. You're not going home. Like, you are needed here. And I was just like, I don't know how, but whatever. He's like, and then in order to make me feel better, which I don't think he did, or at that point I was like, what? He said, Sister Garrett, you can't go home because you're supposed to train next transfer. I said, President, I don't even know the language. I've only been here for like a couple of months. Like, how is that like happening? He's like, yes, after your training is finished, in 6 weeks, you will be training a new sister. And I said, how in the world? So then like we go on, I, end up finding my place. I am starting to become more happy in the mission. And then the transfer call comes and I'm like, okay, there's no way that he's going to do this. My STL, my sister training leader, has told him, yeah, there's no way that she's ready to train. Like, she is way too unstable with the language. And she like told him that because I told her that I was like uncomfortable training. So she told him that to try to sway him. But then he called me anyway as a trainer and was just like, all right, well, I know you can do it. I told you were going to do it and you're going to do it. So like, it was very scary, but that was like some of the best weeks of my life was when I got to be a trainer to the sweetest sister I'd ever met. So I know that I had some because like I definitely wasn't very great at the language at first, but I do remember my very last area. I don't want to embarrass her. I'm not going to say her name, but she was still new to the mission, my companion, and she was American, and she was still learning the language a little bit, and so I was trying to like help her with it. So I like let her like approach people and talk to them before I would kind of back her up. And she asked a guy, she said, nasaan po yung mga magulay mo, which means, so where are your vegetables? Whereas magulang is parents, magulay isn't really anything but gulay is vegetables. So he was laughing at her because she asked him where his vegetables were, but then he responded appropriately. He said like, oh, my parents are here, like whatever at this place. So he like understood her, but he just like was laughing and she didn't understand why. And then I told her later and we just laughed about that forever because she asked them where their vegetables were instead of their parents. I wouldn't bring like a regular like leather purse because I brought one of those, like it was big, but it hurt to carry because it wasn't like, it didn't have any support in the strap. So make sure you've got like some type of strap that has like support in it, like what's the word? It's like a hiking bag. I don't know. They have like those little things in the front, those little straps. Whoops. But it is true. They don't really have toilet paper unless you buy it yourself. So it's not something like the mission supplies for you. So it's kind of expensive. So you kind of have to either just save and make sure that you're saving money for that, or just get used to not having toilet paper and that kind of thing. I also recommend, I wore Crocs my whole mission, like the Croc shoes. I had 2 pairs and they looked like flats, like regular flat shoes. They weren't like the ugly ones with like the holes in the top or anything, but yeah, I wore those like my whole mission and they wore out by the end, but they lasted me the whole time, especially in like the flood season. So just be prepared for that. Make sure you have an umbrella. I mean, you can buy them there, but they're better from the US, like they're better quality. So So in the Olongapo Mission, it's actually pretty safe. We had a few scares where, there were some incidents where we needed to have priesthood holders with us just because of some things that were happening. But for the most part, like, just stay with your companion at all times. Don't like leave her, because if you do that, you're definitely more susceptible to not only temptation, but like actual like physical harm that could happen. Safety wise, we didn't really have any biking areas in the mission, at least when I was there. I think they might have added one, but yeah. So just stay with your companion. That's the only advice I have. Being patient with yourself as well as with others. I feel like a lot of the time it's easy to get frustrated when things aren't going your way, or if like the language is not your first, or you're not the greatest at the language, but like maybe your companion is really good at it. And so like it's frustrating sometimes because you just wish you could be as good as they were. But I feel like in the end, like Heavenly Father, all He wants is for you to just do your best in life and, on your mission, of course. And once you recognize that you are like doing your best, then Heavenly Father blesses you with the strength to be able to continue doing what He's asked you to do, even though at the beginning you're kind of like hesitant, if that makes sense. I learned how to cook on my mission. I could not cook before. You can ask any of my friends. I burned everything. But now at least I know how to cook like some Filipino dishes, and I'm not as afraid to like experiment with other foods. Whereas before I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna go to McDonald's. Like, I don't got time to cook, I also feel like I learned how to more fully accept someone for who they are. Like, I mean, sometimes it's really hard because you're stuck in this society where, you're always trying to like judge people based on like appearance or like things like that. But I felt like in the Philippines that like wasn't an issue. Like, people just didn't really care about how you looked or how you dressed. It was more, the kind of person that you were, if you were kind. And I feel like that's something that I've really taken away from that experience, is like just trying to be kinder to people and like not like judge them on a first glance, but like really like talk to them and get to know them before. So something that I did realize like by the end of my mission was that there was something that everyone that we baptized had to give up to become a member. Whether it was something in the word of wisdom, whether it was moving out after having lived in with their live-in partner or getting married, or even just like a small thing like giving up working on a Sunday, or just, I don't know, there was just always like something little that or something big even, that they had to give up in order to become a member. And I felt like that was such a faith builder for those people, that if they continue to like live that way, they're never going to forget how they felt when they first joined the church or when they first gave that up, because it makes joining the church almost more important or more special for them, because they did have to sacrifice something. So it's really good to just know that the weather, there's only two types. There's either very hot or very rainy. There's not really an in-between. At least in the Olongapo Mission. I know that there's some other missions in the Philippines where it might get a little cooler, but in Olongapo it was almost always extremely hot or extremely rainy. So yeah, just be prepared for that. And sometimes it's going to flood, and it's fine. Like, you'll be fine. Just make sure that I would not bring boots. I would get them in the Philippines, because they're really heavy, and putting those in your bag would be awful to transport. Like, I actually just bought cheap boots there and then left them after the rainy season in that area. Didn't need them again till the next rainy season, then just buy another pair. Like, it's not very expensive, and it's worth it so that you don't get sick. Well, first of all, congratulations on getting called to the Olongapo Mission. It literally is the best mission in the whole world, at least for me. I'm so excited to share with you that the Olongapo Mission really did change my life. And not only did it change my life, but I know that other people's lives were changed because of my service there. And I know that maybe right now you're kind of scared or nervous because you have heard like maybe some different things about what's going to happen when you go to the Philippines. But I just want you to know that, remember that Heavenly Father called you for a specific reason, and He didn't want you to like change who you are to fit a mold that people might be trying to tell you who to be. But He called you personally to be a minister of Jesus Christ in the Philippines Olongapo Mission. And I know that mission calls really do come from Heavenly Father, and they really are inspired. And I hope that, when you get there, after you've kind of gotten over your first few weeks of that new missionary rut, that you just continue to smile. That's like one thing that I guess I would tell you, is just continue smiling and be excited for the adventures that are going to keep happening in your mission. And once you decide that you want to be that obedient, consecrated missionary, you'll see more blessings in your mission than you could have ever even imagined before you left. And I guess that's really just like all the advice that I have for you. And I just hope that, maybe you'll meet some of the people that I have talked about, and you can help them if they're struggling, or, find some more of their family members, which would be really great, because it's important that we just continue building the kingdom wherever it may be in the world.